What happens when a mind too brilliant for its time simply vanishes? This isn't about people who just went missing. It's about disappearances so strange they seem ripped from a conspiracy thriller. 3 cases, 3 brilliant minds, all tied to groundbreaking work that may have sealed their fate. One was a researcher in Antarctica, one was working on anti-gravity, and another was a physicist who could have built the atomic bomb. They all vanished without a trace. These aren't just mysteries, they are chilling tales of scientists whose work may have gotten them erased from history. Carl Robert Disch, the man who vanished into thin ice. Carl Robert Disch was at the peak of his career as a scientist in Antarctica. But Antarctica is not known as the most desolate, frozen corner of the Earth for nothing. It's dangerous and unforgiving, and sometimes people don't make it out. On May 8, 1965, Carl vanished in Antarctica. The brilliant young ionospheric physicist was no rookie. He was a rising star in the world of science. He was a physicist and researcher for the National Bureau of Standards at just 26 years old. An ionospheric physicist, in case you're wondering, is someone who studies the upper atmosphere to understand things like radio signals and solar flares. It's a niche but very important area of study, and Carl was at the top of his game. He was stationed at Byrd Station, the famous research outpost in Antarctica jointly run by the US military and scientific institutions. Sounds cool, right? It was cool, right up until it wasn't. His workplace was the Radio Noise Building, a glorified igloo full of buzzing electronics located about 1.3 miles from the main station. Not a huge distance, but add enough icy wind and fog and it can feel pretty far. Walking 1.3 miles across the frozen tundra to get to work is a surefire way to get hypothermia, get eaten by a mysterious blizzard monster, or walk off into the haze, never to be seen again. The disappearance. May 8th started out as a normal, frigid morning south of the equator. Carl zipped up his Arctic gear and set out from the Radio Noise Building toward the main base, something he'd done many times already. So many times, in fact, it was routine. It was predictable. It was like your neighbor mowing his lawn at dawn every single Sunday without fail. Carl radioed Byrd Station to let them know he was walking back at 9:15 a.m. But this time, Carl never showed up. The team waited and waited, they double-checked, still no Carl. After 45 minutes, they sounded the alarm and sent out a search team. Not because they were panicking, not yet anyway. He had gone the same route over 25 times. They were just concerned that perhaps Carl had fallen down or had an accident. When a guy shows up at the same time every day and then is suddenly an hour late, your mind goes to dark places. We've all been there, we've all lived with worry, but most of the time the worry is unfounded. This time, the worry did spiral into full-blown panic. The team went out into the cold to find Carl. Remember, this is Antarctica. The temperatures were around -44 degrees Fahrenheit with a 30-mile-an-hour wind. Visibility was extremely low, and so the team relied on the hand lines that run from one building to another. At these research stations in cold places like this with bad weather, there is a hand line that runs from one building to another that you can hold onto and follow, even when you can't see anything so you don't get lost. I mean, everything looks the same. It's all just white. You can imagine how easy it is to get lost down there. The search team spread out, some on snowmobiles and some went along the hand line with lights to see if they could spot him. There was no trace of Carl. But they did find footprints in the snow. He had indeed left the Radio Noise Building, presumably headed back to the base. At around 11:30 a.m., about an hour and a half after the alarm, snowmobiles found his footprints leading west, away from the trail. The footprints seemed steady and deliberate, as opposed to the flailing tracks of someone lost or panicked. If Carl had been running, the tracks would show it. The immediate red flag was that the prints didn't follow the hand line that connected the buildings. He had veered off and gone off-grid. It wasn't like him at all to be so irresponsible. But at this point, the search party had to turn around because the wind started whipping, it was hard to see, and the snowmobiles had run out of fuel. When the search party went back out to find the footprints again, it took them 3 hours to find them because the winds were so high. And temperatures had dropped even further to an unbelievable -75 degrees Fahrenheit. That sounds so cold it hurts. Unfortunately, the weather only got worse. Snow started to fall, covering all of Carl's tracks, and unfortunately, it was starting to cover the search party's tracks too, so they started getting worried that they weren't going to be able to get back safely. So they called off the search and headed back to Bird Station. More searching. Later that night, the base organized another search party and made a human chain in the freezing cold whiteout to see if they could spot Carl without losing anyone else. They turned on all the floodlights and set off flares every half hour from the Aurora Tower at the base, but even with all that, the conditions were so bad, the flares weren't very helpful. The next day, May 9th, they sent out another vehicle search party to cover other areas of the base, and they did find some tracks, but they quickly disappeared. They did notice that there was no noticeable shortening of the stride in the track, so it didn't look like he was injured or anything like that. The strange thing about May 9th is that on that day, Carl's dog disappeared. He had befriended a dog at the station, and the day after Carl went missing, so did his dog. For 6 grueling days, they searched, and then slowly but surely, hope started to fade. The footprints were long gone. They found nothing. No body, no parka, no sock, not even a frozen hair. At one point, temperatures dropped to minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly the temperature of Satan's freezer. The wind was so brutal, it could have slapped the eyebrows off a walrus. Despite all the search efforts, the icy wasteland gave nothing back. By May 14th, the search was officially called off. Carl Robert Disch was declared presumed dead. The search team agreed that there was just no way he had survived that long without food in the chilling cold all alone. The community was devastated. Not just the community of scientists in Antarctica, but also his people back home in Monroe, Wisconsin. They held a memorial service for him there, and since then, his disappearance has remained an unsolved mystery. But one day, someone called the McMurdo Station radio tower in 1971 and said, "Hi, I'm Carl. I'm okay." And this launched 1,000 conspiracy theories about what really may have happened to Carl. Conspiracy theories galore. If this was Carl, then he must have gone off on his own on purpose to start a new life. Maybe Carl wanted to disappear. If a guy vanishes without a trace in the middle of the Cold War, surrounded by military scientists in one of the most secretive and hostile environments on Earth, you know conspiracy theories are going to multiply like rabbits in a carrot patch. But again, Disch was a dedicated scientist doing valuable work. This man was very smart. He had only just joined the Boulder laboratory staff the year before, and he was said to be a very intelligent young man who took his work very seriously. And who knows what kind of contributions he could have made to science. It's very sad. He exhibited no known signs of depression, and he didn't leave a note, just his footprints walking into nothing. And in Antarctica, where would he disappear to? How do you start a new life in minus 80 degrees at the bottom of the world? No, the most realistic explanation is that he may have simply gotten lost, even with the handline. Disch took a wrong turn, walked the wrong way, and the weather did the rest. Sure, he knew the route. Yes, he'd taken it dozens of times, and the footprints appeared intentional rather than panicked. But that doesn't mean he didn't stray off course. Perhaps he thought he was holding the landline, but what if his hands were too cold to tell? Maybe he thought he was going in the right direction, but was really wandering off into oblivion. But let me share another theory with you. The 1960s was the peak of the Cold War, and Antarctica was more than penguins and glaciers. It was also a geopolitical hotspot. The US and the Soviets were competing at everything, from getting to the moon to studying Antarctica. Every single scientific field was a war zone between these two superpowers. A theory that many people have is that Disch had valuable knowledge. Exactly what kind of knowledge, nobody can say. Presumably, he knew something that the Soviets wanted to know themselves, and so they kidnapped him. It sounds crazy, but let's not forget that the insane espionage going on during the Cold War made James Bond movies look like documentaries. Both sides weren't above kidnapping scientists if it meant getting what they wanted. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how they did it, why they did it, and where they took him. Or he may have been kidnapped by someone else. In the days surrounding his disappearance, there were reports of strange lights near Bird Station. It was UFOs, baby. Reports say there were strange things in the sky during those days, but whether the UFOs were weather balloons, CIA spy planes, or alien spacecraft, no one can say. Some people believe that Carl was actually abducted, grabbed right into the air. But what about the mysterious radio message? The message said he'd walked away into the snow on purpose because he was fed up with his coworkers. I mean, I guess that's pretty relatable. The message went on to say that he had lived alone in the Antarctic wilderness for years and was slowly losing his mind from the isolation. The message also mentioned his dog, who, remember, vanished around the same time. But unless Carl Disch was secretly part polar bear, there is no way he would have survived for 6 years alone in Antarctica. It's just impossible. The message is real, it's on record, but most people think it was a hoax. So what happened to this brilliant young scientist? The million-dollar question remains unanswered. He just disappeared into the frozen white unknown, leaving a trail of footprints going nowhere. No body, no gear, and no goodbye. Carl left this world with a vanishing act that baffled scientists, sparked decades of debate, and made Antarctica feel a whole lot creepier for everyone. Whether it was a tragic accident, an act of espionage, a breakdown, or something truly out of this world, the disappearance of Carl Disch remains one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. What do you think really happened to Carl? And do you think you could handle living in Antarctica? Let me know in the comments, and stay warm out there. And now for a quick break, but first I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Maria Garcia and Billy Jr. Jonesy for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this, and let me know what you'd like to see in the comments. Dr. Ning Li, the anti-gravity wizard. This story begins in a lab with a brilliant mind, but then takes a turn into the realm of the unknown, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. This is the bizarre and mysterious story of Dr. Ning Li, the anti-gravity scientist who vanished into thin air. Ning Li's journey to stardom began in the early 1990s. Dr. Ning Li had just migrated from China to the US, bringing with her a PhD, a brain sharper than titanium, and apparently zero tolerance for the idea that gravity is an unbreakable rule. Who needs the laws of physics anyway? Ning Li landed at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, where she started working at the Center for Space, Plasma, and Aeronomic Research. Dr. Ning Li isn't just any scientist. She's publishing these peer-reviewed papers with her colleague Douglas Torr that are talking about something truly wild, a practical way to create an anti-gravity effect. Now, this isn't science fiction. She's talking about a theory that if you could get a bunch of ions to rotate in a perpendicular field, you could create a force field, a gravity-like field that could be either attractive or repulsive. She called it AC gravity. The key to her theory was this concept of using high-temperature superconductors to create something called a Bose-Einstein condensate, where all the atoms act as one. The next thing you know, she and her team have a 12-inch prototype disk. Li and Torr figured out how to create a vertical force field that could negate gravity above the spinning disk. Theoretically, you could drop a bowling ball from a plane. It would free fall toward the ground at blistering speeds. But once it got above the spinning disk, or rather the force field created by the disk, it would stop mid-air. Then it would just hover there, suspended. This thing, if it worked, could be a game changer. Li and Torr even invited popular mechanics to come see the early stages of this device. They really seem to be on the edge of making gravity optional. Now here's where the story gets really strange. In 1999, Ning Li left her job at the university to start her own company, AC Gravity LLC. And this wasn't some basement startup. Ning Li received real Pentagon money. In 2001, the U.S. Department of Defense awarded her a grant for $448,970 to research anti-gravity devices. Everyone involved thought this technology was imminent. Even Larry Smalley, the chair of the university's physics department where Li had worked, quit to join her new company. Many people were trying to get their hands on this technology, or at least recreate it for themselves. A scientist in Finland was also working on this stuff. He claimed to have observed a gravity shielding effect with a rotating superconducting disk. He gets a lot of hype, but also a lot of scrutiny, and he eventually withdraws his paper and loses his job. And then there's NASA, trying to replicate these experiments, but they're not even building the rotating mechanism correctly. They're only able to get their disk to spin at 30 RPM. And then Dr. Ning Li got a grant for about $500,000 from the US Department of Defense to continue her work. But she might not have been that happy about it. In an article published by Popular Mechanics, she's quoted as saying that investors wanted control over the technology, and she felt it was too important and should belong to all the American people. But the DoD doesn't just give funding to develop technology to share with the people, it's to keep the projects a secret. And then Dr. Ning Li disappeared. Her career after that is a complete mystery. There are no public findings from that grant. In 2003, Dr. Ning Li gave a presentation at a MITRE Corporation conference titled Measurability of AC Gravity Fields. She gave the presentation alongside a guy from the Redstone Arsenal, a US Army missile base. This was her last verifiable public appearance. The fact that Ning Li was working on a technology so important that it could reinvent transportation, power generation, and warfare all at once is a key part of her disappearance. Given the nature of her research, she became a hot commodity. By 2004, people were talking. Fringe science journalist Tim Ventura tried to track Ning Li down through another anti-gravity researcher named Eugene Podkletnov. Ventura's emails kept bouncing, but he could tell that someone was reading them. Podkletnov eventually wrote back, saying that Li was alive, still working with the DoD, but couldn't discuss her work. The next character to join our cast is Jack Sarfati, a physicist known for both fringe theories and fringe haircuts. In a 2008 YouTube interview, he dropped a bombshell. Jack said she's disappeared and gone back to China. The Pentagon can't reach her anymore, and the Chinese are pouring money into her experiments. According to Sarfati, the real reason nobody could reach her was because she had defected, and China was now possibly closer to building anti-gravity propulsion than the US. Then more radio silence, this time from everyone. You'd think that a missing scientist working for the DoD would garner more attention, but from 2008 to 2018, there was pretty much no word on Ning Li or her anti-gravity device. It was around 2018 that word on the internet started to spread about Dr. Li and her mysterious silent company. Suddenly, Reddit threads, YouTube documentaries, and blog posts with way too many red arrows and circled text started popping up, claiming Dr. Ning Li had vanished. It wasn't in the news, but it was everywhere online. Nobody, not even Reddit's most dedicated sleuths, could find her. The interview. Let's jump to 2023, when journalist Noah Logan sat nervously waiting for the phone to ring, trying to figure out how to ask a man a rather sensitive question. The man facing the question was George Guangyu Men, and his mother just happened to be the world-renowned physicist Dr. Ning Li. Logan had tracked him down by finding his LLC and just calling him. He hoped George could shed some light on a mystery that has been going on for decades now. And he wanted to ask if his mother secretly invented anti-gravity and then disappeared into a black ops lab or another dimension. The problem for the journalist was that George didn't know his mom had disappeared, let alone that millions of people online thought she'd been snatched up by the CIA, defected to China, or built a gravity gun and floated away. Suffice to say, the phone call got a little uncomfortable when Logan started telling George all about his superstar mother's scientific exploits. George was surprisingly kind to a random dude phoning him about his mother. The thing is, Dr. Ning Li was never actually a missing person. You'll never guess where Ning was hiding. According to George, she didn't disappear to China or float off the planet. She stayed in Huntsville, where she'd always been, up until tragedy struck in 2014. While crossing the street on the university campus, Dr. Li was hit by a car. Did you gasp? Are you shocked? I was when I first heard the story. The accident left Ning Li with permanent brain damage, and she was later diagnosed with Alzheimer's. When Ning Li was struck by the car, her husband saw it happen and instantly had a heart attack. He died only months later. In the aftermath of this tragedy, Dr. Li, her brain damaged beyond repair from the car impact, spent the rest of her years living with her son George. He cared for her as she had cared for him as a boy, up until she quietly passed on in 2021 at the age of 79. The theories went wild. Was it really an accident? Was Ning Li hit by that car on purpose because of her work with the DoD? Was she planning to go public? Was she a national security concern? There's simply no way of knowing. The story ends with a brilliant mind destroyed by a brutal accident and a son who cared for his mother to the very end. But what about the anti-gravity research? Despite working with the DoD until 2014, not a single piece of her research after 2002 has ever been publicly accessible. Where's the research? You think the government is tight-lipped about aliens? They have Ning Li's anti-gravity research sealed tighter than a genie in a bottle, tighter than a pickle jar dipped in superglue. This is not a conspiracy theory. Her research really is behind bars, and there isn't a single whistleblower in the whole country who can get their hands on it. What we do know is that her company, AC Gravity LLC, remains active to this day. And what we also know is that more recently, the US Navy has patented some of these strange, futuristic-sounding devices, like a high-frequency gravitational wave generator and a craft using an inertial mass reduction device, with the reason being to counter Chinese advancements. These patents were pushed through despite not having working prototypes, and they sound eerily similar to the very same ideas that Ning Li and Podgletnov were working on. Many mainstream physicists believe the patents are just disinformation. This isn't just about a brilliant woman who went silent for years. It's a tale that leaves you with that unsettling feeling that maybe, just maybe, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we'll ever know. Ettore Majorana, the physicist who ghosted the universe. One of the most legendary disappearances in modern history is a story that involves genius, Nazis, quantum physics, and a guy so smart that Enrico Fermi once put him in the same league as Galileo and Newton. His name was Ettore Majorana. This guy was a physicist extraordinaire. He was one of the most brilliant minds of his time and may have even predicted the discovery of dark matter. But then, at the height of his career, he just disappeared. One side note about Majorana, he was a bit of a fascist. He was a card-carrying member of the National Fascist Party, and he was a devout Catholic. Sometimes a monk, sometimes a beggar, and he may have run away to Venezuela to live out the rest of his life under a fake name. So what really happened to Majorana? The prodigy. Ettore Majorana was born in 1906 in Catania, Sicily, into a family bursting at the seams with brains. His uncle, Quirino Majorana, was a physicist too. Genius ran in the family. In 1928, Ettore joined Enrico Fermi's legendary research group in Rome, the Via Panisperna Boys. Remember Fermi from Fermi's Paradox? These guys were the rock stars of their day, and Majorana was the prodigy among them. He could solve complex problems in his head that would take his peers weeks to figure out. Fermi himself said that Ettore was too intelligent, and if he ever decided to disappear, no one would ever be able to find him. Perhaps Majorana was what you'd call terrifyingly smart. His first paper dropped while he was still an undergraduate, and by 1931, he was throwing around concepts like auto-ionization and infinite component wave equations, which kind of sounds made up, but it isn't. He even made an early, accurate interpretation of the neutron based on an experiment by Irene and Frederick Joliot, months before James Chadwick proved it and snagged a Nobel Prize. Fermi begged Majorana to publish his findings, but Majorana declined. He treated revolutionary discoveries the way most of us treat unfinished drafts of emails. Meh, doesn't feel worth sending. Majorana was figuring things out before other scientists and then not publishing his work, so he wasn't getting credit. I know you should be humble, but this might be too humble. In total, he only published 9 scientific papers in his life, but each one was full of brilliance. One paper was so ahead of its time, physicists ignored it for decades because they didn't know what to do with it. It was like someone writing the Dune books in the 1600s. It would have been total gibberish. He also laid the groundwork for what scientists now call Majorana fermions. This concept is still hot physics real estate today, especially in quantum computing, where companies like Microsoft are trying to build topological qubits based on it. I don't think I know what some of these words even mean. Qubits? I don't know, what is this stuff? The disappearance. In 1938, the year before a certain someone invaded a certain Poland, Ettore Majorana was appointed full professor of theoretical physics at the University of Naples. He was just 32 years old. The recluse suddenly accepted a prestigious position. Everything seemed to be going well, but then a month later, Majorana was gone. On March 25th, he did something strange. He withdrew all of his savings from the bank. That's a huge red flag, right? Why would a newly hired professor with a promising future need to clear out his entire bank account? On that same day, he boarded a steamer from Naples to Palermo. He was supposed to visit Emilio Segre, but Segre was in California at the time. Right before he left, though, he sent a strange letter to the director of the Naples Physics Institute. The letter read, "Dear Corelli, I made a decision that has become unavoidable. There isn't a bit of selfishness in it, but I realize what trouble my sudden disappearance will cause you and the students. For this as well, I beg your forgiveness, but especially for betraying the trust, the sincere friendship, and the sympathy you gave me over the past months. I ask you to remember me to all those I learned to know. I will keep a fond memory of them all at least until 11 p.m. tonight, possibly later too. Signed, E. Majorana." Okay, that sounds like an adios, see you never, safe travels, bon voyage. What the heck did Ettore mean by it? He was never seen again. What followed were some strange telegrams and letters canceling travel plans, saying not to worry, and then that the sea had rejected him. After that, everyone was worried, but he just disappeared. His family offered a reward for information, but nothing ever turned up. Where did Ettore Majorana go? So what happened to Ettore Majorana? Well, this is where the theories and the chilling possibilities began to pile up. His colleagues believed he jumped off the boat and into the sea. But his priest said that as a Catholic, there is no way he would do that. Plus, why the return telegram and the letter? This theory also lacks a body and witnesses. Physicist and biographer Erasmo Recami dug into the mystery and produced documents suggesting Majorana hopped a boat to Argentina. Author Leonardo Ciacia claimed Majorana disappeared out of moral panic. With nuclear weapons on the horizon and things going downhill, he supposedly fled to start a new life. Another theory is that after being embroiled in scientific discoveries for so long, Ettore got freaked out by his own findings and retreated to a monastery to become a monk. This is a popular theory among those who knew him. He was a deeply religious man, and he was known to have mystical crises. Perhaps the stress of his work and the world around him, which was on the brink of war, became too much. He took his money, faked his own death, and retreated to a quiet life of prayer and solitude, leaving the scientific world behind forever. The most grim theory is that he was kidnapped or made to disappear. Some say Majorana was silenced to stop him from helping build atomic bombs for the fascist Italian regime. What if his genius was so profound that someone wanted to get their hands on him, or maybe prevent him from working on something terrible? Remember, this is the 1930s. The Nazis are rising to power, and the world is on the cusp of the nuclear age. There are rumors that Majorana was one of the first to truly grasp the power of nuclear fission. Some people believe he was taken to prevent his mind from being used for evil, or to ensure that his knowledge was used by only one side. Others say he wasn't allowed to walk away because his brain was too valuable, so Mussolini had him. Case closed. In 2015, the Rome Attorney's Office officially closed the case. Their conclusion was that Majorana had willingly disappeared. In 2011, a witness came forward. He claimed to have met a man in Venezuela in the 1950s who was living under the name Bini. This man was shy, reclusive, and brilliant. The witness even had a photo of him. Italian authorities reopened the case, and after using facial recognition software, they concluded that the man in the photo was likely Ettore Majorana. The case was officially closed in 2015, with the conclusion that he had voluntarily lived out his life in Venezuela. But even with that official conclusion, there were so many questions left unanswered. Why did he disappear in the first place? Why the cryptic notes? Why did he never contact his family again? The truth is, we'll never really know for sure. Ettore Majorana, the man who predicted a particle that is its own antiparticle, became a particle himself. A man who was both present in the world and gone from it forever. In recent years, Ettore Majorana's legend has only grown. Maybe it's the weirdness of the case. Maybe it's the fact the Italian police clearly just gave up and called it a day. Either way, the people still want answers. Did Ettore Majorana vanish because he feared the future he helped create? Was it politics, guilt, madness, or was he a genius running from his own brilliance? Most scientists leave behind a few papers and maybe a dusty chalkboard. Majorana left behind a quantum riddle, a Nobel Prize worth of unrealized potential, and a legacy that's equal parts brilliance and Bermuda Triangle. Thanks for watching. Do you know any other scientists who disappeared under crazy circumstances? Let me know who you want me to talk about next time in the comments. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!